16 years. That's how long she spent in captivity by order of her own husband, a woman who was Queen of France and then Queen of England. She gave birth to kings, but they tried to erase her from history. Do you think that broke her? No. At the age of 67, she was released from captivity to take power into her own hands once again. How did a simple girl from Aquitaine become the most dangerous adventuress in Europe? Welcome to the channel Fateful Women of the Ages. Here we examine and discuss the fates of women whose willpower and determination had an indelible, truly fateful impact on history. Eleanor's youth was woven from the golden sunlight of Aquitaine and the tart aroma of southern herbs. She was born when the world still lived by the harsh laws of the sword, but at the court of her grandfather, the famous troubadour Guillaume IX, a different power had already taken hold, the power of beautiful words and courtly love. The girl grew up not in gloomy halls, but in the open galleries of the castles of Bordeaux and Poitiers. She was the eldest daughter of Duke Guillaume X, and from an early age she was seen not only as a bride for a noble house, but also as the heiress to a vast fortune, lands stretching from the Loire to the Pyrenees. Unlike many of her contemporaries, whose lives were limited to prayer and sewing, Eleanor received a brilliant education. She read Latin fluently, knew history, was fascinated by philosophy, and of course was immersed in the world of Aquitaine troubadour poetry. But she was not a bookish person. She loved horse riding, was a skilled falconer, and was not afraid of long journeys across her vast estates. Everything changed when her father went on a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, from which he was never to return. At the age of 15, Eleanor suddenly became the most sought-after bride in Europe. She inherited Aquitaine, a land of vineyards, rich cities, and rebellious barons. Her guardian became King Louis VI of France, known as the Fat. Realizing what a windfall he had in his hands, he immediately betrothed the young duchess to his son and heir, Louis VII. The wedding was lavish, but Eleanor's youth, that carefree southern youth, ended at the border of Aquitaine. When 15-year-old Eleanor, heiress to the boundless and sunny Aquitaine, entered the cathedral in Bordeaux to become the wife of Louis VII, it seemed as if spring itself had married the harsh winter. She brought with her the scent of roses, the songs of troubadours, and the boldness of the southern sun. Louis, who had been preparing for the priesthood until the sudden death of his older brother, was a man of shadows, prayer, and quiet reflection. Paris greeted the young duchess with gray walls and strict etiquette. "I married a king, but it turned out to be a monk," she would later say, and this phrase encapsulates all the bitterness of their union. Eleanor transformed the dull court into a center of courtly love, but behind the outward glamour lay a growing alienation. Louis adored his wife madly, but did not understand her. She despised his meekness, seeing it as a weakness unworthy of a ruler. When the Second Crusade was being prepared, Eleanor saw it not only as a religious duty, but also as a chance to escape the stifling walls of Paris. She was the first noblewoman to take up the cross, and her example was contagious. Eleanor insisted on accompanying her husband on the Second Crusade. She arrived in Jerusalem with her entourage, which was unheard of at the time. The long journey through Europe and Byzantium opened up a whole new world for Eleanor. The splendor of Constantinople, its marble palaces and silk fabrics, dazzled the French, who were used to rough stone. But luxury was followed by bloodshed. In the mountains of Anatolia, the Crusader army faced starvation and ambushes by the Seljuk Turks. Eleanor was blamed for the failures. Her huge train of dresses and luxury items allegedly slowed down the movement of the army. But in moments of real danger, she showed a steadfastness that her husband lacked. The real disaster of their marriage happened not in battle, but in the blossoming gardens of Antioch. Here they were met by Eleanor's uncle, Raymond de Poitiers, the embodiment of the ideal Southern knight, handsome, eloquent, and warlike. In his company, the queen finally felt like a woman. The crusade ended in disgraceful failure at the walls of Damascus. On the way back, on the deck of a ship buffeted by Mediterranean storms, Eleanor and Louis were already strangers to each other. The great pilgrimage, intended to save the Christian world, had finally destroyed their union. She returned to Europe not as a defeated woman, but as a woman who had realized her power. Ahead of her lay freedom, divorce, and a new crown that would make her the most powerful woman of the Middle Ages. But the dust of the roads of the Levant and the echoes of the Antioch disputes remained forever in her heart as a symbol of her first great rebellion against fate. Upon her return to France, the marriage was annulled and Eleanor regained her lands, Aquitaine and Gascony. When the towers of Poitiers saw the galloping cavalcade, few could have imagined that the sound of hooves was reshaping the world map. Eleanor, Duchess of Aquitaine, barely having had time to cast off the stifling mantle of Queen of France and Louis's tiresome prayers, sought no peace. She sought an equal, and she herself wrote a letter to her fiancé with a proposal of marriage. Henry Plantagenet, the future King of England, burst into her life like a force of nature. He was 11 years younger than her, but in his veins flowed the blood of the devilish offspring of the Counts of Anjou, fierce, impetuous, and boundless. Their wedding was hasty, almost secretive, devoid of the pomp and circumstance that had surrounded her first marriage. But this simplicity concealed a threat. On that day, the Angevin Empire was born, a colossal expanse of land stretching from the mists of Scotland to the vineyards of the Pyrenees. The early years of their union resembled a brilliant tournament. It was a rare meeting of two powerful intellects in those centuries. Eleanor, raised at the most refined court in Europe, brought courtliness, troubadour poetry, and the cult of the fair lady to the harsh life of the Plantagenets. Henry, meanwhile, built ships and fortresses, turning their life into an endless journey between London, Rouen, and Bordeaux. They were the perfect couple to conquer the world. She was the golden eagle of the South, whose possessions were richer than any kingdom. He was the red lion of the North, whose energy kept the blood flowing in the veins of old Europe. Their bedroom was a battlefield where kings were born in passion. One after another, sons were born: Henry, Richard, Geoffrey, John, those who would later be called the Lions, and who would ultimately turn their claws against their father. However, the flame that warmed them at first began to burn everything around them over time. Two monarchs in one bed is always an excess of will. Over the years, relations between Henry and Eleanor deteriorated due to his infidelities and unwillingness to share real power with his sons. And when Henry's grown sons rebelled against him, Eleanor actively supported them. The rebellion was suppressed, and Eleanor was captured while attempting to flee to the French court. Henry imprisoned her in a castle, where she spent 16 long years watching from her window as her lion grew old and fought with his own offspring. After Henry's death, her beloved son Richard the Lionheart ascended the throne. While Richard was on the Third Crusade and in captivity, Eleanor effectively ruled England. When Richard was captured, It was Eleanor who accomplished the impossible. At the age of 70, when most of her contemporaries had long since been laid to rest under church slabs, she personally crossed the Alps in winter to deliver a colossal ransom for her son. The last years of her life after John's accession to the throne were the final act of a great drama. She saw everything she had built over decades collapse, but she did not give up. Her legendary journey across the Pyrenees to retrieve her granddaughter Blanche of Castile and marry her to the heir to the French throne became her last political masterpiece. She wove the threads of Europe's future even as her own time was running out. And here are the results of this great woman's life. Her marriages and lands became the cause of centuries-long confrontation between England and France. The roots of the 100 Years' War lie precisely here. She proved that a woman in the Middle Ages could be an independent political player. Thanks to her, the ideals of chivalry, troubadour poetry, and the cult of the fair lady spread from Aquitaine throughout Europe. Share your thoughts in the comments about the challenges and decisions of this extraordinary woman. And subscribe to explore together the destinies of strong women who are by no means weak.